The first dawn of the new year was supposed to bring quiet streets, soft frost, and the distant echo of fireworks fading into memory. Instead, it delivered screeching tires and a violent collision that shattered the peace near Harbor Street. A midnight blue luxury sedan, far too powerful, far too fast, skidded across the wet asphalt and slammed into a concrete barrier. The driver, the senator's daughter, emerged in a haze of perfume, alcohol, and entitlement. She staggered as though gravity itself offended her. Her voice, sharp and slurred, sliced through the cold morning air. "Do you know who my father is?" she barked at the stunned bystanders. A couple leaving a small New Year's gathering exchanged fearful looks as she waved her phone like a badge of immunity. The bitterness in her tone was unmistakable. She believed the law applied only to other people. A police cruiser arrived moments later, its flashing lights painting her face in red and blue. Officer Ramirez stepped out cautiously. "Ma'am, please stay where you are," he instructed. She laughed, loudly, mockingly, as though the officer's authority were part of some elaborate joke. "You can't arrest me," she sneered. "My dad will take care of this." Her arrogance settled over the scene like a suffocating fog. Narrative tension coiled through every corner of the incident. Ramirez noted the stench of alcohol, the unsteady balance, the dilated pupils. His partner quietly photographed the crushed barrier and the skid marks. Even in her intoxication, she sensed their calm professionalism as a threat. "You're wasting your time," she muttered, swaying. "Call him. He'll tell you." Witnesses watched silently, their eyes reflecting anger, disbelief, and fear. One man, still wearing a paper party hat, whispered, "She almost hit that couple." Another recorded the scene on his phone, hands trembling from cold and adrenaline. The defendant pointed at him, snarling, "Delete that or I'll sue you." The fragility behind her fury flickered briefly, like a child terrified of getting caught. Dialogue sharpened the tension. Ramirez, "Ma'am, put the phone down. We need you to cooperate." Defendant, "You need to understand your place." Ramirez, "Right now, my place is keeping people safe." Defendant, "You're ruining my life." Ramirez, "You did that when you got behind the wheel." Her hands trembled, not from remorse, but from indignation, as she was guided toward the patrol car. Her glossy heels clicked unevenly against the pavement, a rhythm of defiance and panic. The night wind carried the metallic scent of wreckage, mixing with the perfume lingering around her like a fading shield. Even then, she kept mumbling, "He'll fix this. He always fixes everything." Inside the police cruiser, her expression shifted. Anger tightened into something more brittle, more dangerous. Fear. She stared out the window at the crumpled barrier as though it were a personal affront. Officer Ramirez exchanged a look with his partner, one of those silent exchanges that said, "This is going to be complicated." As the engine started and the cruiser began its slow drive toward the station, the defendant's phone, now confiscated, buzzed repeatedly from the police evidence bag. Each vibration echoed like a warning. Texts, unread, unseen, but heavy with implication, lit up the dark interior. And one of those messages, when eventually opened in court, would change everything. What none of them knew, not the officers, not the witnesses, not even the trembling young woman, was that this single crash would ignite a chain of moral and political shockwaves. The courtroom ahead would not simply judge her actions, it would expose every hidden thread of power she depended on. And the fallout was only beginning. The courthouse was unusually crowded for a routine morning docket. Word had already traveled through hallways, elevators, and whispered circles of clerks, "The senator's daughter is appearing today." Her name carried weight, heavy, political, electric, and everyone felt it. It wasn't just a DUI case anymore. It was a test of the invisible lines dividing justice from influence. As people filtered into the gallery, an anxious hum pulsed through the room. A court officer adjusted his belt twice before taking position. A clerk tapped her pen against the wood desk, her rhythm tight and uneven. Even the fluorescent lights seemed harsher, casting sharper shadows across the benches. Something was coming, and everyone knew it. Judge Caprio entered with the calm dignity he was known for, but even he sensed the shift in atmosphere. The murmurs quieted. Faces straightened. Postures stiffened. He scanned the room, noticing the clusters of reporters disguised as spectators, the political staffers pretending to be disinterested, the prosecutor with documents stacked like armor. And then he saw her. The defendant sat with crossed legs and crossed arms, leaning back as though the courtroom were a lounge she'd been forced to visit. Her posture radiated irritation, not fear. She tapped her manicured nails against the bench in tiny, rapid clicks, like a metronome of entitlement. Her chin lifted slightly when she caught the judge's eye, but she didn't look away. The prosecutor, Ms. Hale, approached the bench. Her voice was even, but something steely pulsed beneath it. "Your Honor, the state is prepared to proceed on the DUI and property damage charges." She glanced at the defendant, who responded with a slow, mocking smile. Judge Caprio nodded. "Very well. Let's begin." Narration took over the room before any dialogue could. Every eye watched the senator's daughter with a mix of fascination and resentment. The courthouse walls had heard countless pleas, excuses, and regrets, but rarely had they hosted someone so certain she would walk away untouched. Her family name carried influence that had bent more than one institution over the years. But here, in this courtroom, that certainty was tested by something stronger: truth. When the judge asked for preliminary comments, Ms. Hale spoke first. "Your Honor, this incident involves excessive speed, intoxication, and near collision with a pedestrian." The defendant's behavior at the scene indicated both impairment and hostility. The defendant rolled her eyes so dramatically the gallery reacted with a collective inhale. Judge Caprio's gaze sharpened. "Ms. Is there something you wish to add?" She smirked. "Only that this is being blown out of proportion. My father is already aware of the situation." A ripple moved through the courtroom like a small earthquake. The judge didn't blink. "This courtroom does not operate on parental supervision. You are responsible for your actions, regardless of your family name." Her expression faltered, briefly, before settling back into practiced confidence. But the crack had appeared. People noticed. A court officer whispered to another, "She thinks she's untouchable." The other responded quietly, "Not today." Ms. Hale continued, sliding a folder across the table. "Your Honor, we have body cam footage and witness statements ready for review." The defendant's attorney leaned forward urgently, whispering something harsh into her ear. Her posture stiffened. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes darted toward the evidence as if it were a personal betrayal. Judge Caprio folded his hands. "We will review all materials. But for now, the defendant will answer the court's questions directly." Her voice came out sharper than intended. "Fine." The room reacted with silent shock. No one spoke to Judge Caprio like that, not publicly, not defiantly. The judge let a long, thoughtful pause settle over the courtroom, a pause that stretched tension like a wire ready to snap. Then he said, "Your tone suggests you are unfamiliar with how this courtroom operates. You will learn." Her face flushed, not with shame, but anger. The senator's daughter reached for her phone to send a message under the table, an action so subtle she assumed no one noticed. But one person did. Judge Caprio. He watched the glow of the screen on her fingertips and quietly made a mental note. A moment later, her phone buzzed with a message that visibly changed her expression, tightening her eyes, draining color from her cheeks. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly. "Ms. He said, voice calm but cutting, "You seem distraught. Is there something on your phone you wish to share with the court?" Her breath caught, and for the first time that morning, she looked genuinely afraid. The double doors of courtroom 3B swung open with a hollow echo, and silence fell like a curtain. Every head turned. She entered not like a defendant, but like someone arriving late to a gala, chin high, sunglasses on despite the indoor lighting, confidence dripping off her as though it were tailored into her clothes. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, each step sounding like its own declaration, "I don't belong here. I'm above this." Her attorney hurried behind her, whispering instructions she ignored with a dismissive wave. The gallery watched, some fascinated, others repulsed. There was something theatrical about the way she moved, chin tilted, hair perfectly arranged, posture flawless. She wasn't shaken by the gravity of the courtroom, she was irritated by it. She took her seat at the defense table, slouching back into the leather chair as if it bored her. Her fingers, decorated with soft pink polish, drummed impatiently against her phone. The prosecutor, Ms. Hale, noticed and suppressed a sigh. The judge had not yet entered, but already the defendant's entitlement dominated the atmosphere like a perfume too strong to ignore. Narration settled over the room like a dark cloud. Everyone sensed the imbalance: wealth versus truth, entitlement versus accountability. Her presence radiated a psychological tension that made the air tighter, heavier. Even the court officer by the door straightened his stance, anticipating trouble before any words were spoken. When Judge Caprio finally stepped into the room, the defendant didn't stand. She didn't even look in his direction at first. Instead, she typed something on her phone, her thumbs moving quickly, her expression smug. Only when her attorney nudged her, stiffly, did she rise halfway, barely giving the gesture respect. Judge Caprio noticed everything. "Good morning," he said, his tone even but cool. "Please be seated." She sat with an exaggerated exhale, as if participating in the proceedings were an inconvenience beneath her. The judge regarded her carefully, his eyes narrowing just slightly, enough for the gallery to sense that he was already analyzing her like a puzzle with sharp edges. "Ms. Anderson, Judge Caprio said, "today's hearing concerns your charges from the New Year's incident. Before we begin, you will put your phone away." Her lips curled. "It's important," she replied, not bothering to hide the irritation in her voice. Judge Caprio's gaze sharpened. In this courtroom, nothing on that phone is more important than what is happening right now. She flipped her hair over one shoulder. "My father would disagree." Gasps rippled through the room. The prosecutor's eyebrows lifted. A court officer muttered under his breath. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the bench with a calmness that contrasted her volatility. He spoke softly, but the quietness made it more dangerous. "Your father is not the one being judged today. You are." Her jaw tightened. She crossed her legs, shoulders rigid, eyes flickering with the smallest flash of fear she quickly buried. Critical dialogue ensued. "Ms. Hale, Your Honor, the defendant has displayed a pattern of disrespect and non-compliance since her arrest." Defendant: "Stop acting like I'm some criminal. I hit a barrier, not a person." Ms. Hale: "Only by chance." Judge Caprio: "Ms. Anderson, you will not minimize the severity of your actions." Defendant: "Why? Everyone here is exaggerating. I didn't do anything that bad." Her attorney winced, squeezing the bridge of his nose. The judge's patience thinned. Cinematic tension deepened as the judge studied her expression, the flared nostrils, the disdain in her half-lidded eyes, the way she sat angled away from the bench, broadcasting superiority like a weapon. The gallery leaned forward, caught in the slow unraveling of her facade. Judge Caprio folded his hands. "Your demeanor suggests you don't appreciate the seriousness of these proceedings." She let out a short, sarcastic laugh. "I'm not scared of this." Then her phone buzzed loudly, so loud it echoed. The judge's head tilted. "Your phone appears to disagree." Her eyes widened. She snatched it quickly, but not before the judge spoke again, his voice carrying the weight of a turning tide. "Ms. Anderson, bring that phone to the bench." Her breath stopped, and the gallery froze as she stood, gripping the device like something explosive, knowing she was walking toward a moment she couldn't control, and one she might not recover from. The tension in the courtroom shifted the moment Ms. Hale rose from her chair. She moved with a calm precision, carrying a stack of folders that seemed heavier with truth than paper. Her expression was composed, almost serene, but beneath it simmered a controlled fire. A fire aimed not at vengeance, but at justice. A fire sharpened by seeing too many privileged defendants try to outrun consequences. The defendant sensed it. She stiffened in her seat, arms folding, chin lifting as if height could shield her from accountability. The courtroom lights reflected off her phone screen, though now it sat locked in evidence, silent on the table. Without it, some of her confidence had evaporated, leaving a faint tremor in her fingers she tried to hide by clenching her fists. Narration carved the moment with psychological weight. Everyone knew this would be the turning point, the chapter where the state's version of the truth cut through her carefully crafted facade. Ms. Hale cleared her throat. "Your Honor, the state will begin with body cam footage from the arresting officers." She clicked a remote, and a large monitor flickered to life. The gallery leaned forward as the early morning chaos of New Year's Day filled the courtroom. Slurred words, flashing lights, fractured dignity. The defendant shut her eyes briefly. When the video captured her shouting, "My father will crush you for this," her jaw tightened, but she kept her face forward. She wanted to look unbothered, but the courtroom saw through her. They saw the brief twitch in her cheek, the shallow breath, the way her hand gripped the edge of her chair like she needed something to anchor her. Ms. Hale's voice sliced through the silence. The defendant repeatedly refused sobriety instructions, used aggressive language toward officers, and attempted to leave the scene despite clear danger to others. Her attorney rose. "Objection, Your Honor. The prosecution is painting her as violent when she was merely confused." Judge Caprio didn't look up from the footage. Overruled. "Continue, Ms. Hale." The prosecutor nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor." The video continued, showing her stumbling, swaying, asserting her father's power with every breath. The gallery reacted with murmurs, some in disbelief, others in cold recognition of a pattern too familiar: wealth, power, entitlement. Ms. Hale paused the footage and turned to the court. "This behavior is not mere confusion. It is a conscious display of superiority, a belief that the law bends around the wealthy." The defendant snapped. "That's not true. You're twisting everything." Judge Caprio raised a hand. "Ms. Anderson, you will remain silent unless asked to speak." She pressed her lips together, fighting the urge to retort. Her glare toward the prosecutor hardened, but Ms. Hale remained unshaken. If anything, her quiet confidence grew. Dialogue intensified. "Ms. Hale, Your Honor, the defendant endangered pedestrians, damaged public property, and displayed hostility toward law enforcement. The state seeks accountability, not theatrics." Defendant: "You're enjoying this." "You all are." Ms. Hale: "Wrong. I am doing my job, something you should have respected when the officers did theirs." The defendant's shoulders flinched as though struck by an unseen blow. Her attorney leaned in, whispering urgently, but she brushed him off. Her emotions were unraveling, thread by thread. Cinematic description filled the courtroom like smoke. The prosecutor's calm determination. The judge's measured silence. The defendant's cracking composure. The spectators' widening eyes, absorbing every detail. Ms. Hale placed a witness statement on the judge's bench. "Your Honor, the next piece of evidence is from a pedestrian who was nearly struck. He will testify shortly." The defendant's face paled. Her breathing quickened. She whispered to her attorney, "Why is he allowed to testify?" "That's not fair." Without looking at her, Ms. Hale replied, "Fairness is exactly why he's here." Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Ms. Hale, please call your first witness." A door opened at the side of the courtroom. A man stepped in, older, weary, eyes carrying the weight of what almost happened that night. His hands shook slightly, but his expression held quiet strength. The defendant swallowed hard, realizing he was about to recount the moment she nearly ruined his life. The witness took a deep breath, stared directly at her, and said, "I remember everything." The defendant's entire body froze. The courtroom stilled the moment Ms. Hale stood. There was no dramatic flourish, no raised voice, only a quiet, focused intensity that demanded attention without asking for it. Her presence was a stark contrast to the defendant's arrogance. Where the senator's daughter radiated entitlement, Ms. Hale radiated resolve, the kind forged from years of facing power and refusing to bow to it. Narration thickened the air. This was the moment where truth began to breathe. Ms. Hale carried a slim binder to the center table, her heels clicking softly against the linoleum, each step deliberate. She placed the binder down with calm hands, then removed a single sheet. The courtroom leaned in, not because she commanded it loudly, but because her silence pulled them closer. "Your Honor," she began, voice steady but flammable, "the state wishes to present the preliminary narrative of events, including officer observations, witness statements, and behavioral patterns at the scene." The defendant sank back into her chair, arms folding protectively across her chest. Her face was composed, expression polished, but her foot began tapping against the floor, small, sharp tremors betraying her composure. The judge nodded. "Proceed." Ms. Hale read the first paragraph: the time, the location, the speed, the damage to the city's barrier. But every word carried subtext, carefully controlled fire. The defendant's jaw twitched. Her attorney swallowed hard and leaned toward her, whispering urgently. She pushed him away with a small flick of her wrist. Cinematic tension deepened, Judge Caprio watching intently, the gallery holding its breath, the defendant's mask of confidence slipping millimeter by millimeter. When Ms. Hale reached the officer's direct account, the defendant snapped her head up. Officers reported, Ms. Hale continued, that the defendant repeatedly invoked her father's name as a threat. The defendant interjected, voice sharp. I didn't threaten anyone. They're exaggerating. Judge Caprio turned slowly toward her. Ms. You will not interrupt the state's statement. She pressed her lips together hard, eyes narrowing with controlled annoyance. Her shoulders rose with each inhale, her breath quicker than before. Ms. Hale continued, unshaken. The defendant's language included phrases such as... The prosecutor paused, glancing at the judge for permission to proceed. He nodded. Ms. Hale read the line verbatim. My father will bury you for this. Do you hear me? A wave of murmurs rippled through the gallery. Even the court officers exchanged subtle glances. The defendant's face flushed with heat. I was panicking. People say things when they're scared. Ms. Hale turned just slightly, her expression carved in cool precision. People also reveal themselves when they're scared. That line cut through the room. The defendant stiffened, her fingers tightening around the edge of her sleeve. Dialogue sharpened the psychological edge. Judge Caprio, Ms. Hale, continue. Ms. Hale, thank you, Your Honor. The defendant displayed hostility, noncompliance, and reckless disregard for public safety. These are not assumptions. They are documented, recorded, and corroborated. Defendant, you're twisting everything. You're making me sound like a monster. Ms. Hale, no. I'm making you sound accountable. The defendant's nostrils flared. Her eyes watered, not from remorse, but from humiliation. She tried to sit taller, straighter, more unwavering, but her trembling hands betrayed her. Ms. Hale placed the sheet down. The state also wishes to introduce a statement from a bystander who witnessed the near collision. The defendant visibly tensed. What witness? Ms. Hale didn't answer her. Instead, she looked at the judge. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to read a portion aloud. Go ahead, Judge Caprio said. Ms. Hale unfolded the page. I saw my life flash when that car swerved. If I had taken one more step off the sidewalk, I would not be alive today. The defendant's chest rose sharply. She looked away, suddenly unable to face the prosecutor or the reality. Her attorney whispered, Stop reacting. You're making it worse. She didn't seem to hear him. Ms. Hale lowered the paper. Your Honor, the state will call this witness shortly. His testimony is essential. Judge Caprio nodded, his expression darkening with the gravity of the case. Very well. A door opened. Footsteps approached. The defendant leaned forward, eyes narrowing, suspicion, fear, and defiance swirling together. Then she saw the man entering. Her face drained of color. It was the pedestrian she nearly hit. And the look he gave her was not angry. It was disappointed. A disappointment far more devastating than rage. A hush fell over the courtroom as Judge Caprio folded his hands and nodded at the defendant. Miss Hollis, he said gently, this is your opportunity. Tell the court, in your own words, what happened that night. Selina Hollis inhaled slowly, too slowly, like a performer preparing for her cue. She adjusted the pearl button on her blazer, lifted her chin a fraction, and allowed her eyes to soften into a wounded gaze. It was a look trained, perfected, and deployed with purpose. I appreciate the opportunity, Your Honor, she began, her voice trembling just enough to sound practiced but not enough to appear weak. New Year's Eve was overwhelming. I'd been dealing with a lot. Pressure. Expectations. I made some bad decisions, but none of it was malicious. Narration carried the weight of her carefully composed tragedy. She spoke of stress from her father's public life, of constant scrutiny, of being watched and judged by society before she even uttered a word. She painted herself as a fragile figure drowning under the legacy of a powerful man. And as she spoke, the courtroom watched her transform vulnerability into a shield. I only had 2 drinks, she continued. I was not drunk. I was emotional. The roads were slippery. That's all. The prosecutor's eyebrow twitched upward, the smallest, sharpest sign of disbelief. Judge Caprio remained silent, giving her uninterrupted space to reveal herself. Selina pressed on, weaving a narrative that danced between truth and omission. She described the crash like it was an unfortunate accident, a random stroke of bad luck, carefully avoiding the fact that the breathalyzer clocked her at nearly twice the legal limit. Her gaze swept the courtroom like she was searching for sympathy, maybe even admiration. "I don't think people understand what it's like," she whispered, "to be constantly judged because of who my father is. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't irresponsible. I was just overwhelmed." Dialogue sharpened as the prosecutor leaned forward. "Miss Hollis," he said, "are you suggesting that the officer who conducted the breath test fabricated your results?" Her smile flicked. "I'm suggesting the circumstances were misunderstood." Several quiet gasps fluttered through the room, subtle but telling. Cinematic tension deepened. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly above her. The wooden benches creaked as spectators shifted, drawn in. A court officer's jaw tightened as if bracing for what would come. Selina continued, her voice softening into a near whisper designed to pull heartstrings. "My car skidded. I panicked. I was already emotional that night, and yes, I might have cried when the officer talked to me. But crying doesn't make me drunk, Your Honor." Her body language shifted, shoulders rounded, fingers lightly tracing the edge of the podium. Vulnerability as performance. She finished with one final, meticulously delivered line. "I just want the court to see me, not my father's shadow." A pause hung in the air, tender and heavy. Then Judge Caprio spoke. "Miss Hollis," he said slowly, "you mentioned earlier that the officer reached your vehicle after you stepped out on your own. Is that correct?" Selina blinked. "Yes, that's correct." The judge's expression hardened, not unkind, but unmistakably alert. "That's interesting," he murmured, "because the officer's report, and the dashcam video, suggest you were still in the driver's seat when he approached." A ripple of shock moved across the room. Selina froze. Just for a second. Her polished composure cracked like thin ice under pressure. The prosecutor's eyes sharpened. The court officer straightened. Judge Caprio leaned slightly forward, reading the tremor in her silence. And the chapter ended on a single, echoing truth. Her version of the night didn't match the evidence. And now the courtroom waited to see what else she'd gotten wrong. The air in the courtroom shifted again, slower, heavier, as Judge Caprio called the next witness. The prosecutor rose with a quiet certainty, the kind that unnerved even those with nothing to hide. "The state calls Mr. Adrian Wells." A middle-aged man stepped forward, shoulders squared, expression solid as granite. His presence lacked theatrics. Instead, it carried the unmistakable weight of someone who had lived through enough to fear nothing in this room. His clothes were simple. His demeanor, unmoved. Selina Hollis's eyes narrowed. Her foot tapped once beneath the table, rhythmic, irritated. Adrian placed his hand on the Bible, swore in, and took his seat. He didn't look at Selina. He didn't look at the audience. He stared straight ahead, calm and unshakable. The prosecutor began softly, almost respectfully. "Mr. Wells, can you tell the court where you were on the night of December 31st? Adrian nodded. "Leaving the night shift. I was driving home when I saw a black sedan swerve across 2 lanes. Murmurs flitted through the courtroom like sparks from a wire. "Did you recognize the driver?" the prosecutor asked. Adrian turned his head slightly, finally acknowledging Selina. "She was the one," he said without hesitation. "She wasn't in control. Not even a little." Selina's jaw clenched so tightly the muscles trembled. Narration tightened the room around his testimony. Every word he spoke carried the steady cadence of truth. No embellishment, no dramatics. Just the clear memory of someone who had watched a preventable tragedy unfold. "When her car hit the curb," Adrian continued, "I stopped my truck. I got out to see if she needed help." Judge Caprio leaned in, fascinated by the man's composure. "What did you see?" the prosecutor pressed. Adrian inhaled, slow and deep. "She stumbled out of the car. Not emotional, drunk. She was angry, yelling. She kept saying, Do you know who my father is? Selina's eyes flashed, and she shot upward slightly, gripping the table as if she might leap to her own defense. Her attorney placed a hand on her arm. "Don't," he whispered. Cinematic tension sharpened the edges of the room. The witness sat unmoved. The prosecutor's gaze burned with quiet fire. Selina looked like a storm caged behind glass. Dialogue cracked through the air as her attorney stood for cross-examination. "Mr. Wells," he said smoothly, "you're certain she was drunk? Emotions can appear similar sometimes. Crying, distress." "She wasn't crying," Adrian cut in. "She was laughing. Laughing at the officer. Laughing at the situation." He paused, eyes narrowing. "People cry when they're overwhelmed. But they don't laugh like that unless they're intoxicated." Laughter wasn't in Selina's polished testimony. Another fracture in her facade. The attorney attempted another angle. "Could the lighting have misled you? The chaos of the moment." "I was 3 feet away," Adrian replied. Her breath smelled like liquor. Strong liquor. Each word hit like a hammer. Not loud. Not aggressive. But final. The attorney exhaled slowly, defeated. "No further questions." Selina's glare bored into Adrian. Hot, furious, desperate. Yet he didn't flinch. His posture remained perfectly still, a monument of resolve. He had nothing to lose, nothing to hide. Judge Caprio nodded at the witness. "Thank you, Mr. Wells. Your testimony has been very helpful." His voice held an undertone, respect mixed with something more somber. Adrian stood, gave a small nod, and stepped down. But before he reached the door, he paused. Without turning back, he said, "One more thing, Your Honor. She wasn't alone." Every head in the courtroom snapped up. Judge Caprio sat straighter. "Excuse me." Adrian's voice was low, steady, but unmistakably firm. "There was someone else in her car when she crashed. Someone who ran." The room froze, breathless, electric, stunned. And for the first time since the hearing began, Selina Hollis looked genuinely afraid. For a moment, the courtroom existed in pure, suspended silence. The kind that follows a revelation powerful enough to shift the ground beneath everyone's feet. Someone else was in the car. Judge Caprio's gaze drifted to Selina Hollis, who sat rigid, breath shallow, fingers digging crescent marks into the polished wood of the defense table. Her facade, perfectly curated, perfectly controlled, began slipping like paint under heat. "Miss Hollis," the judge said softly, "do you wish to clarify Mr. Wells's statement?" She opened her mouth, closed it, swallowed hard. Narration carried the weight of the unraveling. Her pupils darted, searching for a narrative to cling to. Her mask, elegant reluctance mixed with curated vulnerability, now seemed brittle. Her posture stiffened, shoulders rising, chin trembling ever so slightly. Her attorney leaned close and whispered, "Do not answer without thinking." But the prosecutor stood before she could gather herself. "Your Honor," he said, hands clasped behind his back, "I respectfully request permission to question the defendant regarding this new information." Selina's breath hitched. Judge Caprio nodded. "Proceed." The prosecutor approached with slow, deliberate steps. A quiet predator circling truth. "Miss Hollis," he began, voice deceptively calm, "you told this court you were alone the night of the crash. Is that correct?" "Yes," she forced out too quickly. "A simple yes," he repeated, "to a statement that a sworn eyewitness has now contradicted." He stepped closer. Her eyes flickered away, accompanied by the smallest twitch at the corner of her mouth. "Let's try again," he said. "Were you alone in your vehicle?" "No," she whispered. A ripple of shock coursed through the courtroom, spectators leaning forward, hands tightening around notebooks, officers exchanging glances. Selina shut her eyes, as if hoping darkness might soften consequence. Judge Caprio's tone lowered, serious but not unkind. "Who was with you?" Her silence spoke louder than any confession. The prosecutor pressed on. "Someone ran from the vehicle. Someone who didn't want to be seen. Someone who was either intoxicated, underage, or in some way involved." The muscles in Selina's throat tightened as she swallowed. Her attorney stood abruptly. "Your Honor!" The prosecution is assuming facts not in evidence. The judge lifted a hand. Mr. Hollander, sit down. Your client will answer. Selina's mask cracked further, fractures spreading across her expression like splintering glass. Miss Hollis, Judge Caprio repeated, who was in the car with you? Her voice trembled. I can't say. Can't, the prosecutor repeated, or won't. Cinematic imagery intensified. Sweat glistened at her hairline. Her shoulders curled inward. Her fingers trembled as they intertwined, squeezing hard enough to whiten her knuckles. The confidence she wore like armor earlier had dissolved, leaving something raw and exposed beneath. Miss Hollis, Judge Caprio said, leaning forward, refusing to answer will only make matters worse for you. I'm trying to protect someone, she said, voice cracking like a fault line ready to split. The judge's eyes softened, but his posture remained firm. Justice is not served by silence. Before she could speak another word, the prosecutor retrieved a folder from the table. Your Honor, he said, the state has obtained additional footage from a nearby traffic camera that was just processed this morning. Selina's head jerked upward. Her eyes widened. Fear, recognition, panic. The prosecutor held up a still image extracted from the footage. According to the timestamp, he continued, this video shows the moment of the crash, and it clearly reveals the silhouette of a second individual exiting the passenger side before fleeing toward the tree line. The courtroom erupted in an undercurrent of whispers. Selina's breath came fast, shallow, uncontrolled, the final pieces of her mask falling away. Judge Caprio raised a brow. Miss Hollis, do you wish to identify this individual before the state does? Her lips parted, trembling. A single tear, real this time, slipped down her cheek. But she said nothing. The prosecutor lowered the still frame, his voice gaining weight. Your Honor, we believe this individual may be connected to the text message her father sent during the hearing. A heavy, electric silence fell. And the moment the words landed, Selina Hollis's expression collapsed entirely. Because now the courtroom understood. This wasn't just about her anymore. It never had been. The courtroom felt like it was inhaling, collective, tense, bracing, waiting for the next blow. Selina Hollis sat hunched forward, shoulders trembling, the last traces of her polished persona dissolving under the lights. Judge Caprio's gaze held her for a moment longer before he shifted his attention to the prosecutor. You mentioned the defendant's father's text message, the judge said quietly. Let's address that now. A murmur rippled through the room. This was the moment many spectators had been waiting for. The earlier shock of hearing a senator's message read aloud on speaker had unsettled everyone. Now, with the new revelation of the fleeing passenger, the message felt far more sinister. The prosecutor stepped forward, retrieving a printed transcript. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to enter the senator's text as evidence. It directly relates to the defendant's behavior, her refusal to identify the passenger, and potential obstruction. Judge Caprio nodded. Proceed. Selina froze completely, breath stalled, eyes widening with dread. Narration thickened the tension. This wasn't just about DUI anymore. This was about interference, pressure, and power exerted where the law demanded neutrality. And the text itself was a spark lingering over a courtroom drenched in gasoline. The prosecutor cleared his throat and read aloud. Don't mention him. Not under any circumstances. Say you were alone. I'll handle the rest. A collective gasp erupted, sharp, startled, breaking the decorum of the room. Selina squeezed her eyes shut as if trying to disappear into herself. Judge Caprio's posture stiffened, the way a man straightens when confronted with a truth he wishes he hadn't predicted. Dialogue hit with precision. Miss Hollis, the judge said, voice calm but edged with disappointment, would you like to explain this message? She shook her head slowly, tears welling. I can't. You can, he corrected gently. You simply don't want to. The prosecutor chimed in, tone firmer. This message came in minutes after witness testimony was requested. It indicates knowledge of the passenger and an intention to conceal. Stop, Selina whispered, hands trembling violently. Please. Her attorney leaned in, voice a harsh whisper. You need to keep it together, Selina. Do not admit anything unless necessary. But she was already unraveling. Her breathing turned shallow. Her fingers clutched her blazer like she was holding onto herself. Every mask she had worn throughout the earlier chapters was cracking faster than she could rebuild it. The judge continued, voice steady, almost sorrowful. Your father's message directly instructs you to mislead this court. That is a serious matter. But what troubles me more is your compliance. Selina finally opened her mouth, voice thin and trembling. He was trying to protect. She stopped herself mid-sentence, biting her lip until it whitened. Protect who? The courtroom waited. Miss Hollis, the prosecutor said, is the passenger someone underage? Someone wanted. Someone connected to your father's office. Selina shook her head furiously. No. That's not it. Then what is it? He pressed. Her silence was louder than any confession. Cinematic imagery heightened the moment. The flicker of fluorescent lights overhead cast her trembling form in harsh contrast. A woman in the back row covered her mouth. A court officer glanced toward the judge, anticipating the weight of what came next. Even the wooden walls felt like they were holding their breath. Judge Caprio leaned in, fingers steepled, eyes piercing through Selina's defenses. Miss Hollis, who is him? He asked softly. Selina's breath stuttered. Her gaze flicked to the courtroom door, then to the floor, then, most tellingly, to the camera capturing the proceedings. The realization struck everyone at the same moment. She wasn't just afraid for herself. The judge continued, voice low and unwavering. The truth has a way of surfacing, whether spoken willingly or dragged from the shadows. But I will give you one more opportunity to speak freely. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Panic now openly etched across her expression. I can't, she repeated, voice breaking. If I say his name, everything changes. Judge Caprio's eyes narrowed. Then let me ask one final question, he said, tone suddenly sharper, slicing through the air. Miss Hollis, is the passenger someone this court already knows? The room fell silent. A silence so complete it felt like the world had stopped. Selina's expression crumpled. And in that instant, every person in the courtroom understood. The answer was yes. The courtroom felt like a sealed chamber, air thick, walls closing in, truth pressing from all directions. Judge Caprio sat motionless for a long moment after Selina's fragmented confession. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between disappointment and resolve. Then he spoke. Miss Hollis, he said quietly, please hand your phone to the bailiff. Her eyes widened in absolute terror. My phone. Yes, the judge replied. Your father's message is now part of the official record. To ensure there are no additional instructions or interference, the court will review the device. Selina clutched the phone instinctively, fingers curling around it like it was the last piece of control she had left in the world. Her attorney stood, voice urgent. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Judge Caprio cut him off, tone firm. What is irregular, Mr. Hollander, is a sitting senator attempting to influence an active hearing. Silence carved through the room. The bailiff approached, palm outstretched. Selina trembled, torn between fear, defiance, and resignation. Finally, her grip slackened, and the device slid from her hand into the bailiff's. As the phone was placed onto the polished wood of the judge's bench, the entire room leaned forward, subtly, collectively, breathless. Narration heightened the stakes. This wasn't just a phone. It was a vessel of secrets. Messages. Calls. Names. Truths she had fought desperately to bury. Unlock it, Judge Caprio instructed. Selina hesitated, every muscle in her body taut. I don't want. That, the judge said gently but unmovingly, is not your choice anymore. Her finger shook as she pressed the screen. A soft click. Unlocked. The judge nodded. Place it on speaker mode. A ripple of tension passed through the spectators. A mother covered her child's ears as if expecting something dark. Court officers stood straighter. The prosecutor's eyes sharpened, ready for whatever came next. Selina, pale and trembling, tapped the icon. The phone screen glowed, resting like a ticking device in the center of the courtroom. Judge Caprio began scrolling. Slow. Methodical. Searching. The courtroom was silent except for the faint hum of overhead lights and the distant, muffled traffic outside the courthouse walls. Then, a sudden vibration rattled the wooden bench. Incoming call. The screen lit up with a name. Selina gasped, sharp, desperate. Her hand shot out involuntarily, but the judge raised his palm. "Do not touch it." Her attorney whispered harshly, "Selina, stop." But it was too late. Everyone had seen the name flash across the screen. The prosecutor's brows lifted. The spectators leaned closer. Judge Caprio exhaled slowly. "Miss Hollis," he said, "would you care to explain why this person is calling you during a hearing?" She began shaking her head, her entire body trembling in denial. No, this isn't. I didn't tell him." The judge tapped the green icon. Speaker mode activated. A burst of static. Then a voice, firm, irritated, unmistakably authoritative, filled the courtroom. "Selina, listen to me. Do not say anything about that night. We talked about this. Stay quiet about who was with you." Gasps struck the room in a wave. Selina covered her face with both hands. Her shoulders shook violently. Tears streamed down her cheeks, raw, unchecked, unpolished. But the voice on the phone continued, unaware he was now speaking to an entire courtroom. "If the judge presses further, deflect. Say you panicked. Say anything. Just don't bring him up. For God's sake, we can't afford another scandal." The prosecutor's jaw dropped. The court officers froze mid-step. A woman in the front row whispered, "Oh my God!" Judge Caprio's expression darkened, not with anger, but with something deeper, heavier. "Sir," he said into the phone, voice steady, "this is Judge Frank Caprio. You are speaking to the court." A beat of silence. Then the caller inhaled sharply, an audible realization hitting like a brick. "Judge, The judge cut him off. "Before you say anything further, be aware you are now part of an official court record." Selina sobbed, shaking uncontrollably as the phone remained open on the bench. The silence after the judge's warning loud enough to make the walls tremble. Then, finally, the voice on the phone said the one sentence that froze every soul present. "I didn't mean for him to get hurt." The courtroom erupted. But Judge Caprio raised a hand, face pale, eyes heavy. Because the caller had just confirmed the impossible. Someone in that car had been hurt. Someone who hadn't been found. Someone who might still be out there. And now, everything was about to change. The courtroom felt colder than it had all morning. Not because the air conditioning kicked in, but because every person in it understood that these next few seconds would determine the trajectory of Callan Ward's life. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum more softly, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Judge Marlowe adjusted his glasses, not a nervous gesture, but the ritual of a man who understood the weight of justice and the fragility of those who stood before it. "Mr. Ward," he began, his tone measured, steady, almost surgical. "Before I deliver my sentence, is there anything you wish to say?" Callan rose slowly. His cuffed hands trembled just enough to betray the storm churning inside him. He swallowed once, his throat visibly tightening. I know what I've done," he whispered. "But I'm not the monster everyone keeps saying I am." A faint exhale rippled through the benches, some scoffing, some sympathetic, some simply exhausted by weeks of testimony. Marlowe's eyes narrowed, not in judgment but in study. "You maintain that your actions were not deliberate?" Callan hesitated. His jaw tightened. His gaze flicked toward the gallery where his mother sat rigid, fingers twisted together in a white-knuckled prayer. "I maintain," he said slowly, "that I didn't have a choice that night." The prosecutor, Ms. Halden, shifted her stance, arms crossing crisply over her folder. "Your Honor, the evidence." "I've read the evidence," Marlowe said sharply, raising a hand. "And I will consider it, as well as the defendant's words." Halden's posture stiffened, and even from the defense table, Callan's attorney subtly pressed his lips together as if to signal, "Stop talking." Callan didn't. "I know I messed up," he continued, desperation cracking through his voice. "But if you put me away for the maximum, you're not just punishing me. You're punishing everyone who still believes I can do better." Marlowe let the silence settle. Long, deliberate, suffocating. The clerk shifted papers. A juror cleared her throat. Someone in the back sniffled. Then the judge spoke. "Mr. Callan Ward," he said, voice resonant enough to slice through the tension, "given the severity of your actions and the consequences that followed, this court, a collective inhale, sentences you to 8 years in state custody." Callan's shoulders jerked backward as though struck. His mother's hand flew to her mouth, a strangled sound escaping. The defense attorney lowered his head. Even Halden's usually immovable expression flickered, just for a moment, into something almost human. But the room didn't fully break until Marlowe continued. "However," the judge added, leaning forward, "due to the mitigating circumstances and new evidence admitted this morning, I am suspending 5 of those 8 years." The words detonated in the courtroom. Gasps. Angry mutters. A chair scraping. Callan's mother sobbing. Halden freezing like someone had pulled the ground from beneath her. Callan, trembling violently, gripped the edge of the table as if it were the only thing tethering him to earth. "Suspended," he whispered. "Your Honor." "This means," Marlowe clarified, "you will serve 3 years. If, and only if, you comply strictly with the terms of supervision thereafter." The prosecutor stepped forward, voice sharp. "Your Honor, this is wildly—" Marlowe cut her off with a glare so cold it silenced the entire row behind her. "Ms. Halden, the court has spoken." Callan's knees buckled. Relief, shock, guilt, every emotion collided in his expression like shards of glass. But before Marlowe could finish his final remarks, the courtroom door slammed open. A bailiff rushed inside, breathless, holding a sealed envelope. "Your Honor," he said urgently, this just arrived. It's marked time-sensitive regarding the Ward case." Marlowe frowned. "From whom?" The bailiff swallowed hard. "From the victim." The room broke twice in one day, this time into utter silence. The courtroom was supposed to be empty by now, but the shock of the victim's letter still clung to the air like smoke. No one moved. Not the clerks gathering their files, not the defense attorney rubbing his temples, not even Callan, who sat frozen in the defendant's chair like someone carved fear into stone. Judge Marlowe had not dismissed the room. He simply stared at the unopened envelope, the one that had arrived too late and yet, somehow, too precisely. The door at the back creaked again. This time, the interruption wasn't a bailiff. It was a girl. 17, maybe 18. Thin, wiry, shoulders pulled so tightly inward she seemed to shrink toward the floor. Her hair was a disheveled curtain, damp from rain, sticking to her cheeks. She looked like she had run here, or like she was running from something worse. Callan's breath caught. "Lila!" His voice cracked, raw and discarded. She didn't answer. She didn't even look at him. Instead, she took 3 steps into the courtroom, each step slow, as if testing the ground beneath her. Judge Marlowe's tone softened. "Miss Ward, you weren't expected today." "I know." Her voice trembled, but it carried. "But I needed to hear it. I needed to see him." Callan rose halfway before the bailiff instinctively placed a hand on his shoulder, reminding him of the cuffs still binding his wrists. "Lila, sweetheart, I—" "Don't." Her eyes finally met his, and the impact was immediate. Tears gathered, but didn't fall. Anger flickered, but didn't ignite. It was worse than rage. It was disappointment, exhaustion, loss. "I didn't come here for apologies," she said. "I came to understand why." Callan swallowed hard. "I never wanted to hurt you." "You hurt everyone," she replied, barely louder than a whisper. "And you still don't get it." The room seemed to lean into their conversation, as if even the walls were listening. Callan's attorney cleared his throat, but Marlowe raised a hand, silencing him without a word. "Miss Ward," the judge said gently, "you don't have to speak to your father today. This is a difficult moment. The court doesn't require." "I'm not doing it for the court." Lila stepped closer, her fists clenched. "I'm doing it because I need to say something before he disappears for 3 years." Callan's eyes glistened. "Lila, please." "You taught me," she said, voice cracking, "that people deserve second chances. But you never gave us one." The words hit harder than any sentence Marlowe could deliver. Callan collapsed back into his chair, as though gravity itself had turned hostile. His breath trembled. His shoulders shook once, then twice, just enough for the bailiff to glance down, unsure whether to intervene or pretend not to notice. Lila inhaled deeply, steadying herself. "I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever." Callan bowed his head. A single tear splashed against the wooden table. "But," she continued, surprising even herself, "I needed you to know that I'm trying. Even if you didn't." For a moment, something fragile passed between them. Not reconciliation. Not forgiveness. But the first breath after drowning. Judge Marlowe cleared his throat, breaking the spell with careful restraint. "Miss Ward, there is something else that has come to light." He lifted the envelope slowly, its seal still unbroken. "This letter, written by the victim, arrived moments ago. And it may change everything." Lila's gaze snapped to it. Callan froze. "What does it say?" she whispered. Marlowe hesitated, thumb resting on the seal. "I'm not sure yet." He pulled the envelope open. Silence swallowed the room, until the judge's face drained of color. His hand trembled. This changes the entire case." He looked up at Callan. "At least one person in this courtroom is not who they claimed to be." The New Year's morning should have been crisp, clean, welcome, a symbolic reset. But the courtroom was suffocating. The stale December air still lingered like a ghost, heavy with unresolved truths. No one smiled. No one wished anyone a Happy New Year. There was nothing happy about what waited for them. Judge Marlowe entered with a quiet gravity, the kind that made everybody in the room straighten before they even realized they had done it. His footsteps echoed as though the building itself understood the weight of the day. Callan Ward stood at the defense table, wrists freed for the hearing but still marked from cuffs. His eyes were bloodshot, his posture stiff. He didn't look at anyone, not even at Lila, who sat in the back row, arms wrapped tightly around herself like she needed to keep her ribs from collapsing inward. "Court is now in session," the clerk announced. "Continuation of State versus Ward."